There's a strange comfort in believing you know who you are. Your personality feels familiar, predictable, stable. You know how you react, what you like, and how others see you. And because it feels so consistent, you assume it's real. But what if your personality isn't your identity? What if it's not who you are, but something you built? Something you constructed slowly, unconsciously, not to express yourself, but to protect yourself. The psychologist Carl Jung believed that most people don't live as who they truly are. They live as what they had to become. And that single idea changes everything. Because if your personality is a defense mechanism, then much of what you call yourself was never chosen. It was assembled. Modern culture constantly tells you to be yourself. But Jung would ask a more dangerous question. Which self? The one you show the world? The one you hide? Or the one you have never even met? From a Jungian perspective, what most of us call our personality is actually something else entirely. It's the persona, the mask. It's the interface between your inner world and society. The persona isn't fake, but it isn't whole either. It's a compromise. It's a psychological agreement between who you are inside and what the world around you will accept. And that agreement begins forming very early in life. You see, you weren't born with a personality. You were born with sensitivity, curiosity, instinct, and raw emotional energy. Then the world responded. Some of your behaviors were rewarded. Others were punished. Some emotions were welcomed, while others were rejected. And slowly, without even realizing it, you learned what parts of yourself were safe to express. So you adapted. Maybe you became quieter, or maybe you became louder, more agreeable, or more guarded, more ambitious, or more detached. Not because it was who you truly were, but because it worked. This is how personality forms. It's not born from truth, but from survival. Jung believed that the ego, our conscious sense of I, develops as a defense against the chaos of the world. And your personality is the ego's primary strategy. It asks the answer to one fundamental question. How must I be in order to belong and survive? Think about it for a moment. Why are some people excessively kind? Why are others emotionally distant? Why do some people constantly chase validation while others reject it entirely? These are not random traits. They are adaptive responses. Kindness can be armor. Indifference can be armor. Even confidence and humor can be forms of armor. Your personality isn't neutral. It's shaped by pressure. It's reinforced by repetition. And over time, it becomes automatic. So automatic that you forget it was ever a choice. Or worse, you forget that it was never one to begin with. Carl Jung introduced the concept of the persona to describe this social mask we all wear. And it's important to understand that the persona is not a lie. It's a function. It allows you to operate in society without exposing your entire inner world. Without it, you'd be psychologically naked. But here lies the danger. Most people identify with their persona. They confuse the mask for the face. They confuse the role they play for the self they are. And when this happens, growth stops. Because you cannot evolve beyond what you believe you are. Have you ever felt lost during a period of personal transformation? As if you no longer recognize yourself? Jung believed this wasn't a breakdown, but a breakthrough. When the persona begins to crack, the ego panics because the structure it relied on is dissolving. You might feel anxious, disoriented, or uncertain. You might think, I don't know who I am anymore. But Jung would say, good, because that certainty was the cage. Your discomfort isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something false is dying. If the persona is what you show the world, the shadow is everything you were forced to hide, your anger, your selfishness, your vulnerability, your desire for power, your need for rest, your hunger for meaning. None of these things are evil. They are simply human. But when our environment rejects them, they don't disappear. They sink. They become unconscious. And what is unconscious doesn't go away. It controls from below. This is why people sabotage themselves. It's why they react disproportionately to situations. It's why they project their hatred, envy, or obsession onto others. They are encountering their own shadow, but seeing it outside of themselves. One of the most dangerous misunderstandings is believing that certain personality traits are inherently virtues. Things like niceness, strength, independence, or selflessness. These can be authentic qualities, of course, but they can also be defenses. A person who is always nice may be terrified of rejection. A person who is always strong may be afraid of their own vulnerability. A person who claims to need no one may be protecting themselves from the fear of abandonment. Jung didn't moralize these traits, he analyzed them. And what he found was unsettling. Many people are not living as who they are, but as who they needed to be to avoid pain. Jung called the process of becoming whole individuation. It's not about improvement or optimization. It's about integration. Individuation begins when you stop identifying exclusively with the persona. It happens when you allow contradictions to exist within you. When you stop trying to appear consistent and start becoming real. This process is not comfortable. It feels like losing control, because you are. You are losing control over an image, but you are gaining contact with the truth. Here's an uncomfortable reality. Society doesn't reward individuation. It rewards predictability. It rewards roles, labels, and brands. The more complex and whole you become, the harder you are to categorize. And that complexity can be threatening to the status quo. So people unconsciously pressure each other to remain flat, to remain legible, to remain safe. This is why so many people resist growth. Not because they're lazy, but because growth risks social exile. The persona keeps you accepted, but it comes at a cost. When you live too long as a mask, something happens. You might succeed externally, but feel empty internally. You might be admired by many, but feel completely unseen. You may feel like you're just performing your own life. This isn't necessarily depression in a medical sense. It's alienation from the self. Jung believed that many modern psychological issues stem not from trauma alone, but from living too far from one's inner truth. This is the realization most people never reach. Your personality is not your essence. It is a pattern. It is a strategy. It is a learned response to an environment that, in many cases, no longer exists. And once you see this, something profound shifts. You stop defending your traits. You stop clinging to a fixed identity. You become curious instead of rigid. And curiosity is the beginning of freedom. So what happens when the mask falls? When you stop clinging to personality, you don't become nothing. You become more. More fluid. More alive. More honest. You gain access to parts of yourself that were exiled long ago. Creativity returns. Depth returns. Energy returns. Not because you added something new, but because you removed a constraint. The paradox of the true self is that it isn't a personality. It isn't a list of traits you can write down. It is a center, a living process. Jung described it as the organizing principle of the entire psyche. It cannot be performed. It can only be lived. And the closer you move toward it, the less interested you become in labels. You stop asking, who am I supposed to be? And you start asking, what is trying to emerge through me? Once you realize that your personality is not you, you can't unsee it. You notice when you're performing. You feel when you're hiding. And the old defenses just stop working the way they used to. This can be unsettling, for sure. But it is also the beginning of integrity. Not moral integrity, but psychological integrity, a true alignment between your inner and outer worlds. Most people spend their lives perfecting the mask. Very few dare to question it, and fewer still allow it to dissolve. But Jung believed that the meaning of life wasn't about comfort. It was about wholeness. And wholeness begins the moment you realize you are not broken. You were adapted. And now you no longer need to be. If this video resonated with you, it's probably not because you learned something new. It's because something old inside of you recognized itself. And once that recognition happens, the journey has already begun. Thanks for watching.